My name is Sean Gazala. Good afternoon. Welcome to our workshop, Coping with Returning Back to School. TYSA is a Staten Island coalition of local organizations and community members that work collectively to improve the behavioral health of youth. So see that youth substance use rates go down and youth mental health rates go up. And one of our partner organizations is Staten Island University Hospital. This is the third in a series of workshops we've collaborated on. And just as an aside, if you haven't attended the previous workshops, we do have them on YouTube, and I encourage you to watch them. I can drop the links in the chat later on. But with us today is Dr. Peng, from Director of Child and Adolescent Psychiatry at Staten Island University Hospital. Dr. Peng directs the psychiatric care of children and adolescents at the hospital. She's also an assistant professor at the School of Medicine at Hofstra. And Dr. Peng, as you know, we asked questions of our participants in the lead up to the workshop, just to get a sense of what concerns were on parents' minds as their young adults or adolescents are returning back to in-person schooling. And if you'd like, I could talk about them, or I could just hand it to you and you could.
Sure. So if you like to share the questions with them first, and then kind of just let parents who are here has not got a chance to, read through the questions, then it probably will help them to stimulate them to also, having more questions. And then I will start to answer some of the questions.
Certainly. So if you hadn't responded to the questions when you registered, or if something new comes to you as you're listening this afternoon, feel free to drop them into the chat and we will get the questions to the doctor. But what we asked into the lead up was, what questions do you have surrounding your adolescents' mental, social, or emotional health? Has there been any changes in their behavior that have you concerned? And what concerns do you have around school reopening? And lastly, is your adolescent or child presenting any issues in transitioning back into the school building?
Right. Great. So then I will try to share, I think, the screen. Something. Okay. Just to, I think I prepared some ones. Basically, this is the questions about, I kind of grouped the questions that TYSA set up for this workshop. Thank you again, inviting me back to have this opportunity to work with our parents, in the community. So basically, we'll start with, the questions that parents already raised. And then I would discuss, kind of go through with it to see whether, this is some of the concerns that you have with your kids, or if you have more questions. Okay, so I will use the first part, probably about 20 minutes, 15, 20 minutes, to discuss about questions we already collected. So I grouped them together. So the first one, how to get back to school successfully. So basically parents saying that, how I'm going to help them, my kids, succeed through this time, or how will the students, reintegrate into their classroom. And one of the parents also saying that I'm so excited, for my kid to go back to school. And some kids also saying that I really want to go back to school, but then, really what are, when the kids really go back to school, then they start to also, feeling that there are problems there. So there's a survey just basically on this topic of getting back to school. So they did a survey with both the parents and the students and then the school staff. So basically they're asking, personally, I feel very stressed in this current condition, situation, returning back to school. So for the students, like the red, the very red, and the pink, basically they're saying, I agree with this comments, these statements. So about 50% of the students saying that they agree with that. Currently I'm very stressed with this returning to school. And the parents, 23% plus 18% is also 41%, about over 40% of the parents feeling in this way as well. And then the teachers, the schools, the leadership, they all feel in similar way, over 40% of them feeling like it's very stressful. Then, so what are really, the issues, right? So the reason that the kids, a lot of kids, so we've been working with kids over time, since last March until now, over a year. So a lot of time kids saying that I want to go back to school because I work better with that structure, in the school, with this face-to-face with teachers, with my peers, learning together with me. I like this structure, other kids asking questions that stimulate me to think about things, right? So it's easier for me to engage in learning versus I'm at home without structure. So many distractions. I hear voices, or I hear my mom and dad talking next door, or my siblings, or next door, neighbors, etc. So all these distractions, or I have my, toys, whatever paintings in front of me. So these, the school, returning to school, definitely the kids are looking for that. They really, I think, wants that social interaction with their peers as well. They want to talk together about movies, about games, about, activities. However, we're still in this transition, means that it's not all the kids are all, going back to school, even though with vaccinations, we still have this kind of structure, like a kind of cohorts, right? Different schedules. So with high schools, they're also, some schools has this kind of set up schedules or cohorts saying that, okay, gold, you go in gold color. You go in on Thursday and Fridays. Okay, green, you go in on Mondays. And so they have set days. But some schools, I think I heard some middle schools, they have different, schedules. Okay, this week you go in on these days. Next week you go in on other days. And then, so there are days that kids learning remote, and there are days kids are going into school. So it's very hard, for kids to adapt. Very hard for parents to help the kids while if they are learning at home or if they're going to school. Totally very hard to help the kids. And then it's hard for the teachers as well, right? So the teachers standing in front of the classroom, having 8 kids in front of her, and then there are kids, on the screen as well. And then some kids, they're remote learning, they're saying that, they choose to remote. I think some of the kids still doing this remote, totally remote learning, complete remote learning. And they feel like the teachers don't care about them because they are raising hands. The teachers happen to pay attention to the kids in front of them and not looking at the screen. Or there are also some technology issues that somehow the kids could not hear the sound. They lost the screen, etc. And they expect the teachers to help them. But the teachers are not technicians. They can't do anything about these kind of still technology platform issues. And then the school or the school board, basically, they want to prevent the transmission of, kind of the COVID virus or infection. So they give this tough class schedules. The kids only have 3 minutes in between the classes because they don't want the kids in the school wandering around. So the kids basically from 8 o'clock to 12:45, log in, log off, log in, log off. They don't have time to drink. They don't have time to go to the bathroom. They can't focus for hours, right? This is just not, our human being, our brain doesn't work in that way. For adults, we can't work in that way, and there's no doubt that our kids can pay attention for hours, in the classroom. The schedules basically set them up for failure. So the reason I'm talking about these things, I believe all the parents, you hear about this, you know about this, you see your kids suffering about these things. So then the next one is how I'm going to help my kids, right? As a parent, how I'm going to help my kids. And also kids returning to school, their routines are also different as well, right? So it takes time for them to go back to the normal routine. So I think as a parents, what we can do is that we want to really going down to the bottom to hear, to listen to our kids, what really our kids are encounter. And then I will ask you, please, to write down the specific issues that your kids are encountering. And then understand what are the issues that you can help your kids to solve the problem. For example, routines. You probably can work with your kids on the routines. Go to bed on time, get up early in the morning, prepare before going to the classroom, eat well, sleep well. Because the kids without eating, they have no sugar for their brain. It's just impossible for them to concentrate even for 20 minutes. And then with different, so I see here high school kids, middle school kids, elementary school students, right? So kids, they are different. Some of them can probably, pay attention for 20 minutes at their best. Some kids probably only 10 minutes. So you have to help the kids to say, we have to break down this 45 minutes. We probably will lose some of the information, but what we can do, we can only help our kids to try their best. And then what we can do is that as a parents, we help our kids to communicate with the teachers, either technology problems, either because of the concentration, the class is too long. It's just impossible. The reason I know this is that I know my kids also going through the classes with 3 minutes as a break. So I get them the snacks, I get them the water bottle, beside them, on their desk at home. And then saying that if you have to go to the bathroom, you have to go to, like there's no point to hold there and then, under the stress, and then you won't be able to pay attention anyway, right? Give yourself a break, especially taking the break that that these are the classes or the contents, it's easier for you to catch up later. So these are the things that's, I see these lines are there, it's distracting my attention, but I will listen to you later. Okay, so these are the things. So I'll try to kind of talking about these things with limited time so that we can, help our kids. So this is, we really want to hear, being involved as a parents, that we want to bridging this communication. Kids, it's really hard for them to get teachers' attention, especially the teacher getting 20 questions or 40 questions per day. So you want to contact the teachers, you want to negotiate with the teachers about learning arrangement, schoolwork. My kids have these difficulties. Okay, I will help my kids to catch up, but can you give us some time for transition back? Okay, so we may not be able to hand in the schoolwork, but not as teachers, try to say, okay, for different teachers, for different kids, students, not just to say, okay, too bad, I fail, you fail. Okay, so give the kids transition time. They probably will need several months to get back, right? Instead of just kind of saying, okay, now we're getting back to normal. Everything has to be normal. It takes time, all right? So the teachers and the parents needs to get together and to negotiate the time. So get the teacher's attention, get school counselor, okay? Ask a school counselor to help as well to communicate, to set up plan. If the teacher does not get back to you, the school counselor could not get back to you, don't stop there. Get to the deans, okay? So you need to get the plan, to help the kids. The most important thing is that get your kids back to sleep, the regular normal schedules. You're saying that is very hard. So it depends on the age. I think the younger the students, the better the parents can work with them. Teenagers is hard. But we'll discuss about when to get professional help, right? So some parents will ask, what's the difference between pre-existing issues and the new COVID-related issues? I think pre-existing means that before COVID, how does your kids work with the school, right? Work on their school issues, learning. So you probably know that some of the kids already have pre-existing anxiety, pre-existing mood problems, pre-existing ADHD attention problems. It's hard for them to, get their schoolwork done even before COVID. That we call pre-existing. Or if these issues, you don't have these issues before COVID and now only happens during the school lockdown, right? And these issues coming up, that's the new COVID related issues. That's what we're talking about. And some parents saying that my kids has severe anxiety over returning to school. This happens with kids who has social anxiety. Social anxiety can occur during teenager stage, especially during this COVID time, that a lot of kids going through this stage happen to be in this stage as well. That so it can be pre-existing, aggravated by COVID time, and then now they have anxiety to go back to school. So some kids I know already that I've been working with them even before COVID, that these kids have social anxiety. So now with COVID, the parents seeing that this kid stay at home, they're basically prospering. Like means that they're working so well with their school. They finally get back on their schoolwork because this is remote learning. So it reduced the kids' anxiety to feel like, okay, if they are in school, there are other kids that they compare themselves with. And then they feel anxious about if other kids are judging them or the teachers compare them with their peers. So now at home, they don't have to compare with anyone and they feel so comfortably, working at home. Now returning back to school, they face the same issues again. Then they feel anxious to return to school, and the parents will say, now finally my kids catch back to, on their school learning. Should I push them back? I think this is also, it takes time to deal with this. So we will have to, discuss with our kids, discuss with teachers to say that, the transition back has to be, I would say, take steps. Because social skill, kids going to school is not just learning their knowledge, right? The textbook. They also learn social interaction. Social skill are the skills that the kids needs to develop at this stage, because you want to think about what about in the future they go to college, what about they go to work, right? So they will face new challenges. They will meet people they like, people they don't like, and the people like them and people don't like them. So they have to face these issues. So that's the issue, that if the kids do have social anxiety, we say, then this is the time you probably want to work with professionals to help your kids to transition back to school, but also in the meantime to help themselves to develop coping skills to manage these transition issues, or interacting with peers, with under social situation, under social stress, how they're going to manage the transition back. So I see that it's tapping there as well. So again, I think negotiate a practical transition plan with the kids, with the school teachers. So if really you cannot solve these problems by working, at home with the school, then get professional help. That's where we are here, right? To help the kids to, we say, into therapy sessions. And there are kids, the reason that they don't want to go back to school is that they're still worrying about getting COVID, right? So younger kids, so I do have this first grader, kids that they observe other kids going back to school, having COVID test, and then doing this kind of nasal pharyngeal, whatever they heard, getting the test and has a nose bleeding. that scared her, right? What if this has happened to me? So she gets so anxious. And then they also heard that the kids getting the symptoms of nausea, vomiting, and then they start feeling like they get nausea, vomiting, and they have these symptoms as well at home, or even going to the emergency room because they cannot eat anymore. So with these kind of difficulty, and then worse, they observe their siblings, having these symptoms, and then they get so afraid, fearful of getting sick. So these are the things I think needs reassurance. That's why I'm saying this is social learning, right? So they observe things in their environment, and then this fear being aggravated. So as a parents, we can reassure them. Or these kids coming to me, and then I will kind of treat them, but also discussing with them. Kids can get better when they understand what they can do, what kind of behaviors if they follow through, how to social distancing, how to wash their hands, then they can learn this quickly. So the fear can be really removed by learning the practical means how to help them to protect themselves. I think parents can help them, but if the school and the parents cannot get the kids back to school, giving these worry and fear, then come to us, and then we can work with the kids. After a couple of sessions, the kids will feel much better. Physical symptoms is really a sign of emotional stress. There are parents also talking about bullying. Okay, so bullying is not just happened during the COVID. It definitely happened before as well. So if the kid's saying that he was being bullied when they were in school or during COVID time online, etc., then we do have to address these issues. So the parents were monitoring, what means that the kids getting these kind of being bullied, right? Whether in person or online, and the parents can help them to, monitoring these kind of communication, and then protect them, either report to the school or, contacting the kids' parents, etc. So you can interfere, with or intervene for these kind of unsafe behaviors. So again, involve with the school, and then let the kids talking about their concerns, their issues. These are basically the resources. So again, we listen, right, effectively. So we listen to our kids. We learn about or model about stress management skills and support them with other activities, but also, getting their message across to the school to let the school listen to the kids, about their concerns. Sleep hygiene. So these are the things that's right. Coping skills, etc. And these are the, the informations about on the Staten Island, some of the professional help, the information are there. So then I will open up, to other parents to see whether.
Sure. So we have a question here. My 8th grader is really struggling with school since COVID.
Mm-hmm.
He's anxious about COVID, overwhelmed with falling behind. And now that he's back in school 4 days a week, he refuses to go to school. Before COVID, he was doing great. Now he's barely functioning, can't get him out of bed, dressed or showered, to sit up for class, let alone participate. I'm desperate for advice.
Yeah. So this is definitely, thank you for the parent to raise this question, because this is not something just happened to your kid. I think we see a lot of the kids having difficulty about getting back to the normal routines. So in that case, I think we do need to work with the school together to say that basically the kids has to learn that that's their responsibility to learn. There's no other way around. By law, they have to go to school to learn. If they don't, as this kid, having difficulty, then they have to be seen by us, by the physicians, saying that, either they are sick, then they have a reason not to go to school, or having this kind of a transition time that they can continue to do homeschooling. But homeschooling is not getting up, right? Even at home, they have to get up to do the remote learning. And if they still having difficult, if they're not sick, they have to go to school. The parents do need to contact, I would say, even the court, if there are times that you have to get the legal system in to say, my kid don't listen to me, and I do need someone to help me to get him out of the bed. Most of the time, the kids, when they know that this is the obligation they have to learn, it's like parents who have to go to work, right? Then they know their responsibility, and then they will, go to school. So the parents do need to sit down with them to say that, look, this is your responsibility. You have to go to school. You have to get up. There's no reason that you stay in bed during the day, or not to go to bed, throughout the night playing games. That's not acceptable behaviors.
Thank you. We have another one here. For the first time, my 17-year-old who has an ASD diagnosis.
Autism spectrum.
Thank you. Autism spectrum disorder, diagnosis, dyslexia, and dyscalculia. Dyscalculia is on the honor roll. Remote learning is where my child thrives. How can we talk more about children who do well remotely, and how do we advocate for those children, especially those that attend schools with increased violence and distraction?
Do you mean, I just want to clarify, do you mean that in school, there's violence in the classroom? Is that the case? So kids with autism spectrum disorder, that's another issue. I think also with this designation or diagnosis, I think it's the kids also have different varies with in terms of functioning. Some kids can have comorbid anxiety as well. If that's the case, then you need to discuss with the school about how to transition back, because what's your plan for him for the future, right? 17-year-old, if he's high functioning on honors roll, okay, as what you're saying here, you do expect that he's going to college in the future, right? Or you expect that he will be independent in the future to work. If that's the case, high functioning kids, I think being at home for over a year, definitely it takes time for him to transition back to school. We have to have a, sit down. I believe your kids have professional, mental health professional working with him. So you need to sit down to work out actual working plan to say how many days, or how many hours you will start to transition back remote learning versus trying once per day, 1 day per week to go back to school. If you feel like the small learning class environment, like with other kids being behavioral, having behavioral issues, you feel like your kid is already kind of not an issue, no behavioral issue in the classroom, you can discuss with the school to do reevaluation to see whether he can be, transition back to the regular educational program. But for the time being, they're all taking time, right, to do the evaluation. Then you negotiate with the school again to set up a pragmatic, learning plan, for your kids. You, as a parent, you definitely can advocate for him for what's the best for him in terms of learning experience. All right. So it goes with case by case, but you definitely want to discuss with his mental health worker. If he has a therapist, then you can work with the therapist in more detail about educational plan.
Thank you, Doctor. And
Um,
the questioner clarified that they meant violence in the classroom.
They meant violence, right? So there are probably other students, right? So that means, again, your 17-year-old probably already become so mature now that that learning environment is already, it's not, meet his learning needs. So you need to negotiate with the school to do the reassessment. I don't know whether he's in senior year or he's in junior year, right? If he's in junior year, junior high school, then this is the time you probably want to negotiate to say whether he needs to be, reevaluated and to go back to, another higher level of learning instead of into these smaller, restricted learning environment. Another issue, because I want to kind of open up the floor for parents to ask a question, but I do want to comment on if you have kids who during the COVID time, they're progressing from middle school to high school, from elementary school to middle school, means that they are during the COVID time, they start their 6th grade or they started their 9th grade. Okay, these students basically are very hard for them to kind of adapt when school opens, right? They probably have a lot of anxiety because they were in this kind of, we call it transition period, that they started middle school, they started high school, just by numbers, actually. They don't really have the real experience in the new learning environment. They even lose their, contact with their, prior friends in elementary school or in middle school, but they didn't have the chance to meet their, new peer group, right? Either in high school or middle school. They didn't even have a chance to face in face kind of communication with their teachers. So to them, when they return to when school reopens, they really start their high school the first time, or middle school the first time, even though they're expecting to be sophomore or 7th grade. So they do have difficult time. So I like parents to bear that in mind, to say that, okay, your kids probably still needs time to transition into the formal high school or middle school environment. So they need a lot of support. If you see your kids, having difficulties going back to school, returning to the new learning environment, you do need to advocate for your school, for your kids, to contact the school counselor, to get the teachers, be aware that this is not just regular high school kids. So the teachers need to be reminded to know that this is a new batch of students that they need time to transition to the high school or transition to the middle school. They need time to build up their peer learning environment, so that they probably need some kind of individual counseling as well. So in high school or in middle school, they have school counselors that assigned to group of students. So parents need to know their counselor's name and contact the counselor to help to communicate with the teachers about the kids' needs, learning needs, social needs, etc.
Okay, and we have questions have begun flowing in. So first, so what do you do when during COVID, a child has engaged in more risk-taking behaviors, like trying drugs, sneaking out, just overall not listening to rules, or not responding in the way that they used to?
Right. So we do have, because during the COVID time, again, there's kind of less, actually, in reality, less academic demand. And also, I think parents are, working as well. So the kids have more time on their own. Teenagers, they feel easily bored because they were not able to engage in learning, or learning is too hard for them. So they kind of on themselves for a lot of time. So they go to the park, they met other kids. And then they're still teenagers. So they're so, they're still very curious, right, about a lot of things. And then whether because of their own curiosity or because of peer pressure, right, they start to try things. And then, or some of them hung out with the wrong crowd. Okay. And then this is the time that they start to have these difficult behaviors. So when these happening, I think as a parents, you do need to work with them to set up the limits, to say, okay, school coming back, these are not accepted behavior. If they put themselves in danger, for example, they go out, sneaking out in the middle of the night, and this is the time that parents, this is the, the responsibility fall on your shoulder, that you have the responsibility to keep them safe. Kids at this time, they're still young. So a lot of time, even though we're saying that they bear the consequence of their behavior, is still, they don't know what's the consequence. They don't understand what's the serious outcome that they're facing. So in that sense, the parents have to set up the rules. You have to report. If report means that report they're missing, if they're running out of the house more than, overnight, for example. And then especially kids, when they're on drugs, they become so impulsive. Even they don't intend to harm themselves or harm others, the consequence will be more severe if they're under drug influence. So it's very hard for them to control their behavior if they're intoxicated. So the parents do need to kind of being alarmed on these behaviors and bring them for treatment or emergency room for evaluation if you see these behaviors repeating. Especially after you're discussing with them, setting up rules, and they don't listen to you. That's the time that you need to take it seriously. Get them the professional help as soon as possible, because otherwise it will be quickly out of control. And then it will causing, I'm just saying, the serious outcomes that the kids cannot bear, and you may not be able to afford either, like in terms of the danger. So we do have kids get into physical fight, or even being drugged and then being sexually assaulted, or being so they are sex trafficking happening. I don't know whether parents heard about these words. So there are people looking for kids, especially female or male, abduct them, and then giving them drugs, and then being basically assaulted, get them to these kind of criminals, so that they're being sexually abused. So these are happening. So that's why I think parents do have the responsibility to make sure that they have to get their kids. If they see that the substance abuse has become a pattern, you do need to bring the kids for treatment, especially they're not attending school anymore. They're not staying in the house at bedtime, in the evening. These are the times that you need to bring your kids to the hospital for evaluation or get treatment.
Thank you. We have another here. Society's really set up for extroverts and neurological children. How can we support introverted children who prefer to be at home?
That's a good question. Again, this is something that whether you're introverted, or so basically personality wise, right? So this is always a spectrum, right? So some people are born extroverted, some people are born introverted. majority of the kids in the middle. Kids' behaviors can be modified, can be learned, right? So if we can remember when we were a kid, a lot of us actually personally, for just share some information that some kids can be very introverted when they were young, but they still know how to function. They have to learn the social skills, because in the future, when they turn 18, when they become adulthood, right? In their adulthood, I mean, they have to be an independent person. Otherwise, who will support them? Rarely parents will outgrow our kids, right? So there are times that they have to become independent. They have to be able to socialize. They have to be able to work to support themselves. So introverted people still can learn social skills. So they cannot stay in the house for the rest of their life, right? It's just like, then the kids will feel they will suffer. Unless we're saying that these kids, we're talking about even kids with social anxiety, they will learn how to manage, the coping skills. Are they kids that are pathologically, having difficulties? That's another issue. What I'm talking about is that the kids we all have different personalities, but that's not the reason that the kids cannot function. The kids always can learn, developing skills to be functional adults, when they grow up. They just need to learn how to mastering these skills, basically.